Imagine, just for a second, um, spending years of your life dedicating your weekends to aggressively harassing Saturday shoppers.
Oh, wow, yeah. With a PA system, right.
Exactly. You're out there in the town square shouting a literal turn or burn message.
Yeah.
And you're trying to save the eternal souls of people who, just wanted to buy some groceries.
Right, they're just running errands.
Yeah. And you are doing this because you genuinely, deeply believe you're performing this act of ultimate rescue.
It's a profound level of conviction. I mean, it's the kind of belief that dictates every single choice you make. But when you look at the psychological engine driving that conviction,
Yeah.
it is almost entirely built on a foundation of sheer terror.
And that is the core tension we are unpacking today. Imagine the psychological whiplash of realizing, years later, that the intense fear you were preaching was actually the exact opposite of the divine love you were trying to share.
It's a massive shift.
Huge. We are jumping into a deep dive today based on this really compelling YouTube interview hosted by Steve Reed, where he sits down with Paul Goff. And Goff is an academic, an author, and, well, a former hardcore street evangelist who went through this complete ideological overhaul.
From a totally fear-based worldview to a love-based one. And if you are listening to this right now thinking, well, I'm completely secular, so why does a street preacher's theological crisis matter to me?
Right, why should they care?
Because the implications of this are just staggering for human psychology. At its core, this deep dive explores the mechanics of fear-based motivation versus love-based motivation. It examines how our underlying worldview fundamentally alters how we process daily anxieties, manage our relationships, and even construct our own identity.
Okay, so let's unpack this by looking at where Goff started. Because to really grasp his radical conclusions later on, we need to understand the pressure cooker he was operating inside of.
Yeah, you have to know what crashed the system.
Exactly. So Goff had this dramatic conversion experience at age 15, right in the thick of the Word of Faith and Pentecostal movement. And let's break that down for a second, because if you aren't familiar with that specific world,
The psychological weight of it might not be super obvious.
right, what is that environment actually like?
Well, the Word of Faith movement is heavily focused on the idea that your spoken words literally have the power to create reality. It's often summarized as name it and claim it.
Okay.
So if you have enough faith and you confess the right scriptures, you'll experience health, wealth, success. But the flip side of that coin is incredibly dark.
Because if things go wrong,
Exactly. If you experience illness or poverty or failure, the system implies it is your own fault. You lacked faith or you're harboring some hidden sin. It places an agonizing burden of constant psychological vigilance on you.
that pressure is just constant. And Goff was so all in that he was reading the book of Revelation entirely unguided while sitting on an airplane.
Oh my gosh, at 15?
Yeah. He carried a physical Bible in his pocket everywhere he went, just so he could memorize massive chunks of it. By 16, he was an itinerant preacher. He was leading street teams to confront youth gangs and, hassle people doing drug deals in the suburbs.
He was definitely looking for a visceral, real encounter with the divine.
But the only mechanism his tradition gave him to express that was highly combative.
Right. What's fascinating here is the primary tool he was handed to save people was just the threat of eternal punishment. He was trading entirely on fear.
Yeah.
But eventually, the friction between his actual lived experience and the texts he was memorizing just became too great.
And here's where the pivot happens. I mean,
Right.
Goff is a guy who basically memorized the Bible. He read the verse in 1 John that says, perfect love casts out fear, probably 100 times.
So
But suddenly, one day, the logic just shatters his worldview. Why then? Why did it click at that specific moment rather than the 99 times he read it before?
well, it rarely happens in a vacuum. When you're operating a high-intensity, fear-based religious system, it requires an immense amount of cognitive and emotional energy.
You're just constantly scanning.
You are constantly policing your own thoughts, policing everyone else's behaviors, and trying to appease a deity you fundamentally view as hostile. And eventually, the human nervous system just burns out.
It can't sustain it.
Right. Goff realized his church had essentially put God in a tiny transactional box. The cognitive dissonance just peaked. I mean, If the text says perfect love does not trade on fear, then a theology relying entirely on the fear of hell to motivate people.
Is fundamentally flawed.
Exactly, flawed at its structural core.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy. It's like running a piece of software built entirely on malware detection anxiety.
Okay, I like that.
The program is constantly scanning for threats, flagging every minor error as a catastrophic system failure, and just burning up all your CPU. And then you suddenly realize the core operating system wasn't actually built for threat detection at all. It was designed for seamless, effortless connection.
Yeah.
But how do you rewrite your whole code without crashing the computer?
You don't. You have to initiate a complete system wipe.
You can't just patch it.
No, you can't just patch a fear-based code with a love-based software update. They're totally incompatible. You have to completely uninstall the fear protocol.
Wow.
And Goff actually described that period of detoxing from his religious ideas as feeling like going through hell. Because when you lose that fear-based scaffolding, you don't just lose a set of beliefs.
Right, you lose everything connected to it.
You lose your community, your daily routine, your sense of certainty, and your very identity as the righteous one. You have to endure the system crash and rebuild from the ground up.
So when the system does crash,
Yeah.
and the fear is completely uninstalled, what replaces it? Because this requires a total redefinition of what conversion even means.
It really does.
In Goff's old fear-based model, conversion was spatial. Like, you are standing out in the cold, totally separated from God. You say the right prayer, check the right boxes, and boom, you step through a door into God's presence.
But if the divine is truly omnipresent and fundamentally loving rather than hostile, that spatial model completely falls apart. You cannot travel to a place you are already in.
Right. And Goff shares this brilliant metaphor for his new definition. He says, conversion is not going anywhere. It's simply waking up to a reality you are already inhabiting.
Waking up in the room.
Exactly. Imagine you're having a terrifying nightmare. In the dream, you are trapped in some distant, hostile wasteland running for your life. When you wake up, you haven't traveled thousands of miles.
No, you just opened your eyes.
You realize you were in your own safe bedroom the entire time. You were never actually in danger. You were just asleep to reality.
The broader implication of this changes the entire nature of spiritual identity. It shifted the goal from acquiring a new, elevated status to simply recognizing your inherent existing status.
Which is a huge paradigm shift.
It is. Goff uses a narrative from the Gospels to illustrate this mirror effect. So Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he asks Peter, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter answers, "You are the Christ."
And the response is immediate. The second Peter recognizes who Jesus truly is, Jesus tells Peter who Peter truly is. He says, "You are Peter, the rock."
Recognizing the divine acts as a mirror that reflects our own true identity back to us. Jesus acknowledges Peter's natural lineage, Simon, son of Jonah, but then immediately calls out his actual enduring identity.
The rock.
Right. When we view the world through the lens of love, we stop seeing ourselves and everyone around us as fundamentally flawed, separate, or in need of aggressive fixing. We start seeing everyone as inherently included.
Okay, wait, hold on. I'm struggling to picture how that plays out practically. If he has always been in the room and everyone is already inherently included, why did he feel so disconnected and terrified for all those years?
Because the nightmare feels real when you're in it.
Fair enough. But more importantly, if everyone is perfectly loved, regardless of what they do, doesn't that breed massive complacency? Why bother changing your behavior or contributing to society if the heavy lifting is already finished?
And that is the most common pushback to unconditional love, and it touches right on the core of human behavioral psychology. We are conditioned to believe that without the threat of punishment, people will just default to their worst instincts.
Because that's how we run society,
Yep.
right?
Exactly. But Goff counters this by pointing to the story of Zacchaeus. He was a deeply corrupt, wealthy tax collector who was actively exploiting his own people. Jesus walks into town, looks up at Zacchaeus in a tree, and just invites himself over for dinner.
Just like that.
There is no demand for repentance, no threat of hell, no transactional requirement. It is pure, unmerited inclusion.
And the reaction from Zacchaeus is explosive. He spontaneously stands up and offers to pay back 4 times what he stole from people and give half his wealth to the poor.
Spontaneously is the key word there. It wasn't a forced religious exercise. When you encounter true, unconditional love, it naturally compels action. You want to make things right because your internal disposition has changed.
Sure, Zacchaeus paid it back, but that's one guy having a profound personal experience. Does unconditional love actually work as a broader societal motivator?
You're wondering if it scales.
Yeah. Do we fundamentally need laws, boundaries, and the fear of consequences to keep a community functioning? Because if we just tell everyone they are fine exactly as they are, society feels like it would collapse into chaos.
Well, there is a vital distinction between managing behavior and transforming character. Laws and the fear of consequences are extrinsic motivators.
Meaning they come from the outside.
Right. And they are necessary for establishing societal boundaries and preventing immediate harm. Fear will absolutely stop someone from robbing a bank if they think they'll go to prison, but fear-based compliance only changes what you do when someone is watching. It doesn't change who you actually are. Love-based motivation, though, is intrinsic. It changes your desires.
So it changes what you want to do.
Exactly. Goff's argument is that a theology or worldview built only on behavioral management through fear will eventually breed resentment, burnout, and hypocrisy. Only when people feel deeply secure and loved do they develop the intrinsic motivation to care for their neighbors when no one is forcing them to.
Okay, so if we successfully strip away the fear of eternal punishment and we are resting in this intrinsic unconditional love, what do we actually do with the very real practical anxieties of daily life?
Because the bills still exist.
Exactly. Even if I'm not afraid of hell anymore, the electric bill still needs to be paid. The medical test results are still pending.
The material world remains full of chaos, suffering, and genuine risk. Removing spiritual terror does not remove economic or physical reality.
And Goff has a phrase for this daily panic that completely stopped me in my tracks. He calls worry functional atheism.
Which is just a heavy, brilliant synthesis. It describes the moment we completely abandon our belief in a loving framework because we feel overwhelmed.
It is the false belief in the exact moment of your panic that you've been completely abandoned and it is entirely up to you to fix the universe.
Yes.
To illustrate this, Goff points to the story of Mary and Martha, and he frames it in a socio-economic context I'd literally never considered before.
It really changes the reading.
Usually this story is preached as a simple lesson in priorities, right? Martha gets a bad rap for stressing out in the kitchen over burning a casserole, while Mary is praised for sitting peacefully at Jesus' feet. But Goff points out what Martha was actually facing in the ancient Near East.
The socioeconomic reality of her situation was terrifying. We are looking at a family with no parents mentioned. It's an unmarried older sister, a younger sister, and a brother, Lazarus.
Okay.
In that patriarchal culture, a woman's financial security and social standing were entirely tied to the men in her family. They seem to have some estate and status, but Martha is carrying the immense burden of managing it.
She is the one holding the fragile ecosystem of their survival together. She's facing potential bankruptcy, social ruin, and the very real possibility of her siblings ending up destitute. Her fears were not petty kitchen complaints. They were valid life-or-death issues.
And notice how Jesus responds to her. He doesn't dismiss her anxiety or tell her she is being dramatic. He validates that she is carrying a massive, very real burden. But he tells her that Mary has chosen the better part.
Meaning what, exactly?
He is introducing the concept of operating from a place of rest, even when the external pressures are enormous. Goff argues that acting from a place of communion and rest actually makes you far more resilient and effective than acting from a place of sheer panic.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The way I conceptualize this is the difference between frantically paddling a canoe upstream out of absolute terror.
Oh, that's a great image.
Yeah, you're paddling because you think if you stop for even a second, you're going to be swept over a waterfall. Your muscles are burning, you're exhausted, and you feel entirely alone.
Versus what?
Operating from rest is like putting your canoe into the current of a river, trusting the flow, and letting the water do the heavy lifting while you just gently steer.
That perfectly captures the essence of Goff's shift. Because the modern world operates almost entirely on the frantic upstream paddling model. The stock market trades on fear, advertising trades on inadequacy, political campaigns run on existential dread.
It's all fear-based.
Right. And when you operate from that fear, you're isolated. The buck stops with you, and if you fail, everything collapses. But when you operate from rest, you recognize you are participating in a larger, supportive current.
You aren't doing it alone.
Exactly. You are still taking action. You still have to steer the canoe, pay your bills, manage your life, but the motivating energy is completely different. It is sustainable.
Okay, so resting in the river makes total sense for the anxious, burned-out people like Martha. But what about the people who actually love paddling upstream? The overachievers who think they're totally strong enough to conquer the river all by themselves.
The high-performing, high-potential individuals. This is where Goff brings in the narrative of the rich young ruler.
Right. This guy was the ultimate religious and societal overachiever. He kept every single rule, he had the wealth, he had the status, he checked every conceivable box, but he still felt this underlying emptiness.
He knew something was missing.
So he goes to Jesus and essentially asks, what is the final missing piece I need to acquire to get that deep peace? And Jesus agrees that he's done everything right according to the rules. But then Jesus tells him to sell absolutely everything he has and give it away.
And Goff says Jesus did this to crash his truck into the wall of his own competence.
I love that phrase.
It is a stunning visual. The rich young ruler was trapped by his own self-sufficiency. As long as he believed he could engineer his own salvation or earn his peace through his own flawless competence, he would be stuck on an endless treadmill of performance.
Just constantly paddling upstream.
Yes, he was completely blind to the fact that the connection he was desperately seeking was already right in front of him, requiring absolutely nothing from him.
He was standing face to face with what he wanted, and he couldn't see it because his massive truck of achievements was blocking the view.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, people historically read this interaction as a harsh punishment from a demanding deity. But Goff reframes it as the judgment of love.
The judgment of love.
Yeah. Sometimes love acts like a grenade. It has to detonate our dysfunctional, self-sufficient systems. When we build ivory towers of competence and wealth, we isolate ourselves. Those systems ultimately leave us bored, vexed, and disconnected from the shared human experience.
So love blows up our illusions of control so we can finally wake up.
It violently forces you out of your comfort zone, yes.
And Goff makes his brilliant point that even if you somehow achieve the mythical perfect life, the perfect house, perfectly managed finances, flawless reputation, this kind of love won't let you just sit there and enjoy your own reflection.
No, it won't.
It will compel you to leave your safe ivory tower and go sit in the gutter with the broken, the messy, and the marginalized. Because once you wake up to the fact that everyone is inherently connected, your compassion just can't remain stone-hearted when others are suffering.
So we have seen how this grenade of love blows up our self-sufficiency when we're wildly successful. But what happens when we completely fail? How does this theology handle our deepest regrets, our traumas, and the true horrors of human history?
Where does this framework go when we hit absolute rock bottom?
Exactly.
Well, Goff views the crucifixion as ground zero for human suffering. He points specifically to the moment on the cross when Jesus says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And Goff emphasizes a crucial linguistic distinction here.
What is it?
This is not a petition. Jesus isn't asking permission or hoping God might consider forgiving people. It is a cosmic decree of absolution.
Wow. It is a moment where the divine actively absorbs the absolute worst of humanity. Goff notes that this moment gathers everything into it, both the worst, most shameful things we have ever done and the most horrific things that have ever been done to us.
Oh, the trauma.
Our betrayals, our abuses, our deep systemic failures.
He quotes a friend of his who summed it up perfectly. From the dope to the pope. Every single person is brought into this singular moment of cosmic absolution. The slate isn't just wiped clean so we can start trying to earn our way back again. The entire ledger of transaction is thrown into the fire.
And this isn't just an abstract theological exercise for Goff. It dictates the practical reality of how he interacts with the secular world today. Because he believes this absolution is universal and already fully accomplished, he does not feel the need to manage anyone else's spiritual state.
He's definitely not standing on a Saturday corner with the PA system anymore trying to terrify people into compliance.
No, definitely not.
Now, his approach is to simply validate the goodness he already sees in people. He tells non-believers, here is where I see the spirit of love operating in you. Or if the specific word Jesus carries heavy religious trauma for someone, he doesn't force the vocabulary.
He meets them where they are.
Right. He'll say, here is where I see Mother God and your daily acts of kindness and the way you care for your community.
He is identifying the divine in their natural compassion without requiring them to sign an intellectual statement of faith first. He is honoring the reality that, in his view, the divine is already present in them, holding them together, whether they have the theological framework to articulate it or not.
It's beautiful, really.
It is a profound shift from trying to forcefully drag God into a secular space to quietly recognizing that God is already operating in those spaces.
The personal evolution of Paul Goff is just incredible. I mean, from a combative street preacher trading exclusively on the currency of fear to a man who literally finds the divine in the messy, unstructured reality of everyday life.
It's a complete 180.
Totally. The interview even mentions he's now having deep theological debates about the Trinity with his 5-year-old daughter in the car.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, she simply observed that if Jesus is in the rocks and the rocks are in Jesus, then Jesus must be in absolutely everything.
Out of the mouths of babes, right. It perfectly encapsulates his entire journey away from the rigid boxes of his youth. And if you want to explore the granular details of his story, he outlines this theological detox and his new framework in his book, Damascus. Encounter the Unexpected Christ, and through his organization, Champions of Hope.
It's a journey that challenges all of us, regardless of our specific belief systems. Because whether you are navigating complex personal relationships, trying to survive a high-stress corporate workplace, or wrestling with your own internal spiritual life, the core takeaway really demands our attention.
Motivation born of love, communion, and rest is infinitely more sustainable and ultimately more transformative than motivation born of fear, anxiety, and a desperate need to control outcomes.
The frantic upstream paddling will eventually exhaust your nervous system.
Yes, learning to trust the river will actually carry you.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thing to chew on, based on Goff's incredible paradigm shift. If waking up simply means realizing you are already in the room, completely secure and perfect loved without having to earn it,
Yeah.
what part of your life are you still sleepwalking through right now, exhausting yourself as you wait for a special invitation that was actually sent the moment you were born?